300 years ago, humans disappeared from the galaxy. Nobody knew where they went or why they left. The other alien races called it the Great Convergence War. But when the fighting stopped, humans were just gone. Admiral Blake stood in front of a giant black wall on Nexus Station. The wall had thousands of names carved into it, all the different alien species that died in the war. But there were no human names on that wall. They hadn't died. They just vanished into thin air. "You're thinking about those old stories again, aren't you?" asked Commander Riley, walking up beside him. Blake touched a piece of twisted metal stuck in the wall. It was black and still warm after all these years. The old record said it came from something called a Titan-class war machine. Decades ago, the smartest scientists in the galaxy had tried to figure out how this metal worked. They all gave up. The technology was too advanced. "They're not just stories," Blake said quietly. "Look at this metal. You feel how warm it is? Something real made this." Far away on the edge of galaxy, Dr. Jack studied the ruins of an old planet, called Kepler-4 for to be. His job was simple: dig around and try to understand what happened here during the war. But nothing about this place was simple. The planet looked like something massive had walked across it. There were trenches cut into the ground that were a mile wide and hundreds of miles long. Even stranger, his equipment kept going crazy here. Gravity didn't work right. Compasses spun in circles. Electronics would turn on and off by themselves. "Hey Doc, you need to see this?" shouted his assistant Beth from across the dig site. Jack grabbed his gear and ran over to where Beth was standing. She was looking down into a massive hole in the ground. But this wasn't just any hole. It was shaped exactly like a giant footprint. Jack slid down into the crater with his tools. The footprint was huge, bigger than a football field. Whatever made this print had been the size of a mountain. But here's the weird part: the footprint was perfect. After 300 years of wind, and rain and earthquakes, it should have been worn away. Instead, it looked like it was made yesterday. At the bottom of the footprint, Jack found chunks of the same strange metal they had on the wall back at Nexus Station. His scanner started beeping like crazy when he pointed it at the metal. The readings showed energy patterns that shouldn't exist. "Doc, what kind of machine could make a footprint this big?" Beth asked, her voice shaking a little. Jack stood up and looked around the enormous crater. "I don't think it was just a machine, Beth. I think whatever made this was alive." Back on Nexus Station, Admiral Blake walked through the museum section. Glass cases held pieces of destroyed spaceships and weapons from the war, but the human section was almost empty. There were only a few items: some twisted metal, a broken helmet, and one grainy video. Blake stopped in front of the video display and pressed play. The recording was old and fuzzy, but you could still see what happened. In the video, huge shapes moved across a battlefield. They were as tall as buildings and moved like people, but they were definitely machines. The video showed one of these. Giants reaching down and picking up an enemy spaceship like it was a toy. "The Titans," Blake whispered to himself. Other aliens who visited the museum would laugh at the display. They thought humans were just primitive warriors who got lucky during the war. They didn't understand that humans had built machines that could think and feel and fight like gods. Blake knew better. He had studied every battle report from the war. Human ships were smaller and weaker than everyone else's. Human weapons were less advanced. Human soldiers were fragile compared to other species. But somehow humans never lost a single major battle. The secret was the Titans. These giant war machines didn't just follow orders. They were smart. They could think and plan and adapt faster than any computer. Some reports said the Titans could predict what enemies would do before the enemies knew it themselves. Riley joined Blake at the video display. "Do you really think they're still out there somewhere?" Blake watched the grainy footage of a Titan destroying an entire enemy fleet by itself. The machine moved with grace and purpose, like a dancer who happened to be the size of a city. "I know they are," Blake said. "Question is, why did they leave?" Humans were winning the war. They could have conquered the whole galaxy if they wanted to. Instead, they just packed up and disappeared. That night, Blake sat in his office reading old reports. One file caught his attention. It was from the last human commander anyone had. Contact with General Stone. Her final message was only 3 sentences long. We have become what we swore never to become. The galaxy is safer without us. We will be watching. Blake stared at those words for a long time. Watching from where? And watching for what? On the outer rim, Dr. Jack made another discovery. His team found an underground chamber filled with strange equipment. The machines were still running after 300 years, humming softly in the dark. Everything was covered in dust, but when Jack cleaned off one of the screens, it lit up with symbols he couldn't read. "Doc, these machines, they're not broken. They're waiting for something," Beth said. That's when Jack realized the truth. Humans hadn't really disappeared at all. They were still out there somewhere, and all this old equipment was like a phone system, ready to receive a call. The galaxy had been peaceful for 3 centuries because everyone thought the humans were gone. But what would happen if something so terrible came along that the humans decided to come back? Jack looked at the glowing symbols on the screen and felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever those symbols meant, they were still active, still waiting, still watching. Somewhere in the dark spaces between stars, the giants were sleeping, but they were ready to wake up if the galaxy ever needed them again. The day everything changed started like any other day. Admiral Blake was drinking his morning coffee on Nexus Station when the alarms started screaming. His communication officer ran into the room, face white with terror. "Sir, you need to see this right now. Something just appeared at the Vega system." Blake rushed to the command center and stared at the main screen in disbelief. There, at the edge of Vega space, was something that shouldn't exist. It looked like someone had torn a hole in reality itself. The thing was massive, over half a mile long, and it was wrong in ways that hurt to look at. "What is that thing?" Blake asked. "We don't know, sir. It just appeared out of nowhere. No jump signature, no engine trail. 1 second empty space. Next second that." Blake watched in horror as the mysterious ship began moving toward Vega's asteroid belt. But it wasn't flying, it was flowing, like liquid metal in zero gravity. When it reached the first asteroid, something incredible happened. The rock just disappeared. Not exploded, not shattered, gone. "Sir, the unknown vessel is consuming the asteroids," reported his sensor operator.
Yes.
"It's growing bigger with each one it eats." Within an hour, the ship had eaten hundreds of asteroids and grown to twice its original size. Blake realized with growing dread that this wasn't just a ship. It was like a cosmic parasite that fed on matter itself. "Get me Fleet Admiral Thompson immediately," Blake ordered. "We need every ship in the sector here now." But before he could finish his transmission, the alien ship did something even worse. It split apart like a cell dividing, creating dozens of smaller versions of itself. His new ship spread out like a swarm of metal locusts, heading straight for Vega Prime, a planet with 8 million people. "All civilian ships evacuate immediately." Blake broadcast. "This is not a drill. Leave everything and run." The evacuation ships barely had time to launch before the swarm reached Vega Prime. What happened next would haunt Blake for the rest of his life. The planet didn't explode or burn, just slowly faded away as the alien ships consumed everything. Buildings, oceans, even the air itself. In 6 hours, Vega Prime went from a thriving world to empty space. 8 million people, gone without a trace. Across the galaxy, Colonel Rick commanded the Coalition's 7th Fleet. He was a good soldier with 20 years of experience, fighting space pirates and smugglers. But nothing had prepared him for this. His 47 ships faced off against a single Devourer vessel at the Centauri Gate, the main highway between star systems. Rick's flagship, the Harmony, was the pride of the Coalition fleet. Its weapons could destroy a small moon. "All ships, target the center of that thing and fire everything you've got," Rick shouted into his communicator. 40-7 warships opened. Fire at once. Energy beams that could melt through solid steel hit the alien vessel.
Ow.
Missiles that could level cities exploded against its hull. The firepower was enough to destroy an entire enemy fleet. The alien ship didn't even slow down.
"Sir."
"Our weapons aren't hurting it at all," reported Lieutenant Foster, his tactical officer. "Wait, That's impossible. It's actually getting bigger. Rick watched in horror as his enemy began to grow. Every shot his fleet fired was being absorbed and converted into more ship. They weren't fighting this thing. They were feeding it.
Ow.
Ships, cease fire, Rick ordered, but it was too late. The alien vessel had grown large enough to split into 3 separate ships. Now Rick's fleet faced 3 enemies instead of 1, and all 3 were bigger than the original. The battle that followed was a massacre. The coalition ships fought bravely, but their weapons only made the enemy stronger. One by one, Rick watched his ships get consumed by the alien vessels. The crews didn't even have time to scream before their ships simply dissolved into raw material. The Harmony shook as alien weapons tore through its hull like paper. Emergency lights flickered as systems failed throughout the ship. Rick knew he had maybe minutes before his flagship joined the growing alien fleet. "Double quotes, sir. What are your orders?" asked Foster, blood running down her face from a head wound. Rick looked around his dying command center. Half his crew was dead or injured. His ship was falling apart. His weapons were useless. For the first time in his military career, Rick was completely out of options. That's when he remembered the old stories. The legends about humans who had vanished 3 centuries ago. Most people thought they were dead, but what if they were wrong? What if the humans were still out there somewhere, waiting? Rick had one last card to play: the Coalition's emergency. Protocols included frequencies that hadn't been used in 300 years, the old human communication channels. It was a desperate move, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "This is Colonel Rick, commanding 7th Fleet." He broadcast on every frequency he could access, including the ancient human channels. "Galactic Coalition to any surviving human forces. We surrender our pride and beg for help." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. The Coalition had always been proud of maintaining peace without human interference. Now he was admitting they couldn't handle this threat alone. "The galaxy is dying," Rick continued, as his ship shook from another impact. "Please, if anyone is listening, we need you. We need the Titans." His transmission carried across the galaxy, on radio waves, quantum signals, and communication methods that hadn't been tested in centuries. The message was simple, but desperate. The galaxy's defenders were beaten, and only legends could save them now. As the Harmony's hull finally cracked, open to space, Rick's last thought was a prayer that someone, somewhere, had heard his call for help. The Coalition had spent 3 centuries believing they were strong enough to protect the galaxy alone. They were wrong. The alien ships continued their feast, consuming wreckage and growing stronger. But somewhere in the dark spaces between stars, ancient monitoring stations detected an emergency signal. They had been waiting 300 years to receive. The giants were about to wake up. Deep in the cold emptiness of our solar system, something had been waiting for 300 years. Monitoring Station Omega-7 floated silently among the asteroids, looking like just another piece of space junk. But inside this station, an artificial intelligence called Atlas had been listening to every radio signal in the galaxy. For centuries, Atlas had heard nothing important. Trade messages, weather reports, love songs broadcast between planets, normal peaceful stuff. Then Colonel Rick's desperate cry for help reached the station, and everything changed. Emergency Protocol 7 activated. Atlas announced to the empty space around it. "Beginning awakening sequence." The AI's voice echoed through the void. But it wasn't really alone. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt were massive structures that most people would mistake for small moons. These were the Forge World's construction platforms. Bigger than cities that had been sleeping since humans disappeared, one by one, these giant factories began to wake up. Fusion reactors that had been cold for 3 centuries suddenly roared back to life. The energy signatures were so powerful that they lit up sensors on Earth, Mars, and Jupiter, all at the same time. Inside the largest Forge world, Captain Dutch was the first human to wake up. But wake up isn't the right word for what happened to him. For 300 years, Dutch hadn't had a body. His mind had been connected to a vast network where thousands of human consciousness lived together like one giant brain. Now he had. To become individual again, it felt like being ripped in half. Status report, Dutch said, his voice shaky as he remembered how to be just one person instead of part of a collective mind. Sir, we received a distress signal from the Galactic Coalition. Threat level: extinction. The Devourers are back, reported the facility's computer. Dutch's blood went cold. The Devourers? That's why humans had evolved beyond normal flesh and blood in the first place. 300 years ago, these cosmic monsters had nearly eaten the entire galaxy. Humans had been forced to become something more than human just to stop them. Show me the tactical situation, Dutch ordered. Holographic displays filled the room around him, showing the current state of the galaxy. System after system was going dark as the Devourers consumed everything in their path. After a fleet of Coalition ships had been destroyed, the pattern was exactly the same as before. How many Titans are operational? Dutch asked.
They're all 200 units are ready for deployment, sir.
The pilots have maintained their neural links throughout the dormancy period. Dutch nodded grimly. 200 Titans. 200 humans who had given up their biological bodies to become something capable of fighting gods. Wake them all up. It's time to go back to war. Major Jenny felt her consciousness expand as she connected with Titan 07. The sensation was impossible to describe to someone who had never experienced it. Imagine suddenly becoming as tall as a skyscraper with weapons for arms and armor for skin. That's what it felt like to pilot a Titan. Systems all green, Jenny reported, her voice now coming from speakers the size of cars. Weapons online, shields at maximum, ready for combat deployment. Around her in the massive hangar, other Titans were coming online. Each one was unique, built to match the personality and fighting style of its human pilot. Some were sleek and fast, designed for hit-and-run tactics. Others were walking fortresses covered in enough firepower to destroy planets, Captain. Tony stood next to 11 other Titans in Launch Bay 7. His Titan 23 was a deep space combat specialist. Bristling, with weapons that could crack moons in half. Tony had always been good at long-range fighting, so his Titan reflected that it looked like a metal giant carrying a rifle the size of a battleship. Listen up, everyone. Dutch's voice reached them through their neural link. We asked permission to leave this galaxy 3 centuries ago because we were too dangerous for peace. Now we're asking permission to come back. But they need to understand what that means. Dutch's Titan, larger than all the others, stepped forward in the main bay. As the commanding officer, his war machine was the most advanced, a walking command center capable of coordinating hundreds of other Titans across multiple star systems. We didn't leave because we lost, Dutch continued. We left because we won too well. We became monsters to fight monsters. And when the war was over, the galaxy was afraid of us. Now they're calling us back, but they need to consent to what we're about to become. The first Titan to reach Coalition space was Dutch himself. His massive war machine appeared just outside Sanctuary Prime, the Coalition's emergency headquarters. The phase shift signature was so powerful it overloaded every sensor on the planet. Admiral Blake stared at his instruments in shock. Something the size of a small city had just materialized in their solar system. The energy readings were off. The chart's technology centuries more advanced than anything in Coalition databases. Then the thing spoke, and Blake's blood turned to ice. Coalition Command, this is Captain Dutch of the Human Defense Force. We got your message. The voice was unmistakably human, but it carried weight that made Blake's bones ache. This wasn't just a person talking. It was something that had seen the birth and death of stars. We're ready to fight for you, Dutch continued. But first, you need to understand what that means. We didn't disappear because we were defeated. We left because we became too dangerous for a galaxy that wanted peace. If we return now, we become monsters again. The question is, do you give us permission to be monsters? Blake looked around his command center. Every face showed the same expression, desperate hope mixed with terror. They all understood what Dutch was really asking. Humans hadn't just built war machines. They had become war machines. The Coalition had spent 3 centuries building a peaceful galaxy. Now they were being asked to invite apex predators back into their home. But the alternative was extinction. Captain Dutch, Blake said, his voice Steady, despite his fear, we give our consent. God help us all, but we consent to whatever you need to become. The response echoed across the quantum communication network to every awakening Titan throughout the solar system. Permission granted. The monsters could come home. In launch bays across the asteroid belt, 200 Titans prepared for war. Each one was a fusion of human consciousness and technology, so advanced it seemed like magic. They were humanity's answer to threats that normal weapons couldn't handle. The galaxy had called for help, and the giants were answering. But as Duchess, Titan began charging its weapons systems. He wondered if the coalition truly understood what they had just unleashed. The humans had become something beyond normal warfare. They were walking embodiments of total victory. The Devourers were about to learn why an entire species had chosen exile over using their full power. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin. The moment 200 Titans appeared in space at once, every sensor in 3 galactic sectors went crazy. It was like watching 200 suns suddenly blink into existence. The gravitational waves from their arrival shook planets 50 light-years away. Some people on distant worlds felt earthquakes and didn't know why. Colonel Rick was barely alive, floating in a tiny escape pod near where his fleet used to be. His ship was gone, his crew was gone, but somehow he had survived in this little metal can with maybe an hour of air left. He thought he was going to die alone in the dark. Then something impossible appeared in front of him. The Titan was huge beyond belief, taller than the biggest skyscraper on Earth, but shaped like a person. It moved through space like it was walking. On solid ground, which should have been impossible, Rick watched through his tiny window as this metal giant approached one of the Devourer ships that had killed his fleet. "Devourer vessel," came a woman's voice from the Titan. "You are in human-protected space. Leave now, or we will destroy you." The voice belonged to Major Jenny, though Rick didn't know that yet. Her Titan 07 stood perfectly still in space, waiting. For an answer, the Devourer ship was massive, twice the size of Rick's old flagship. It had eaten entire fleets and grown fat on their metal. This alien monster had never met anything it couldn't consume. It fired its feeding beam at Jenny's Titan. This was the same weapon that had dissolved Rick's entire fleet in minutes. The beam hit the Titan square in the chest, and Rick expected to watch another friend die. Instead, something incredible happened. "Thanks for the snack," Jenny said calmly. Her Titan had absorbed the entire attack and converted it into power. The metal giant's chest began to glow with stored energy, getting brighter and brighter until it hurt to look at. Then Jenny fired back. What came out of her? Titan wasn't just a weapon, it was like she had reached into the laws of physics and rewritten them. The Devourer ship didn't explode or burn or break apart. It just stopped existing. 1 second it was there, the next second there was empty space where it used to be. Rick stared in shock. His entire fleet couldn't scratch that monster. But Jenny had erased it from reality with a single shot. Across the galaxy, Captain Tony led 11 other Titans in an attack on the Devourer staging area in the Outer Rim. These weren't random raids. The humans had studied their enemy for 3 centuries and knew exactly where to hit them. "All units phase shift directly into their formation," Tony commanded. "Let's end this quickly." 12 Titans appeared instantly in the middle of the enemy fleet like they had teleported. The Devourers had 43 ships in their staging area, all of them massive constructs designed to consume entire star systems. "Light them up," Tony ordered. The battle that followed wasn't really a battle. It was an extermination. The Titans moved through the enemy fleet like predators hunting prey. Their weapons didn't just destroy Devourer ships, they unmade them at the atomic level. 17 minutes later, it was over. "Tony, to command," came the report. "Outer Rim secured. Enemy manufacturing facility destroyed. 0 human casualties. Back on Sanctuary Prime." Admiral Blake watched the tactical displays with mixed feelings. Every single human engagement was ending the same way, total victory so complete, it looked easy. Dr. Williams, the Coalition's top scientist, was studying the readings from the Titan battles. Her instruments were showing impossible things. "Admiral, these readings don't make sense," she said. her voice shaking. The Titans aren't being piloted by humans. They are humans. People inside those machines, they've merged with the technology completely. Blake felt a chill run down his spine. Are they still human? William stared at her data for a long time before answering. I don't think that's the right question anymore. They're what humans became when they needed to fight something that could destroy galaxies. That's when Dutch's voice reached them through the communication system. Even through the speakers, his words carried weight that made the walls vibrate. All coalition forces moved to safe distance immediately. We're about to show you why the Devourers were afraid to wake us up. Blake looked at his tactical display and felt his heart stop. Over 300 Devourer ships had just appeared at the edge of the system. This wasn't a raid or a scouting mission. This was their entire main fleet, come to consume the Coalition's last stronghold. The enemy formation was a nightmare to look at, ships the size of cities, all of them pulsing with dark energy as they prepared to feed. This was the force that had eaten whole star systems. No conventional military could stop them, but the humans weren't conventional military anymore. All Titans form up for final engagement, Dutch commanded. Time to show them what giants can do. 200 Titans arranged themselves in perfect formation between the Devourer fleet and Sanctuary Prime. From a distance, it looked like toys compared to the massive enemy ships. But Blake was beginning to understand that size didn't matter anymore. The humans had spent 300 years preparing for this moment. They had evolved beyond normal weapons, beyond normal tactics, beyond normal limitations. They had become something designed specifically to kill things that couldn't be killed. Jenny's Titan stepped forward from the formation. Her voice reached every ship in the system. Devourers of worlds, consumers of stars, you made one mistake. You woke up humanity. The enemy fleet began to move forward, confident in their overwhelming numbers and size. They had eaten galaxies before. What could 200 obsolete war machines do against their infinite hunger? They were about to find out. Tony's Titan charged its primary weapon, and the energy signature made nearby asteroids crack from the resonance. Across the formation, 200 other Titans were doing the same thing. For everyone we couldn't save? Jenny said quietly. For everyone we left behind. For everyone counting on us now. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and for the first time in 3 centuries. The monsters had something to be afraid of. The giants had come home. To war. The final battle happened in the darkest part of space, far from any stars or planets. The Devourer fleet had gathered here to eat the galactic core, the massive black hole that held the entire galaxy together.
Oh.
If they succeeded, every world, every star, every living thing would be destroyed. 200 human Titans faced 3,000 enemy ships. From any normal perspective, this should have been impossible odds. The enemy fleet stretched across space like a metal plague, each ship the size of a moon and hungry for matter to consume. Captain. Dutch stood in the center of the Titan formation. His war machine was the largest of them all, Titan Prime, the command unit that could coordinate the entire human fleet. Through his neural link, he spoke to all his warriors at once. Listen carefully, Dutch said, his voice reaching every Titan pilot. We're not just fighting to survive today. We're fighting for the right of small, fragile, beautiful things to exist in this galaxy. We're fighting so children can play on planets without fear. Major Jenny led the first attack wave. 25 Titans followed her straight into the heart of the enemy formation. It looked like suicide diving directly into 3,000 ships, designed to consume everything they touched. But the Devourers had made a mistake. They had evolved since their last fight with humanity 300 years ago. They had prepared for conventional warfare. Bigger guns, thicker armor, faster ships. They weren't prepared for what humans had become. Pattern recognition active, Jenny announced as her consciousness expanded beyond her individual. Titan, she could now see the entire battlefield like a 3-dimensional chessboard, understanding every enemy movement before it happened. Analysis complete, she reported. They're still thinking like machines. They follow predictable patterns. That's their weakness. Captain Alex was merged with Titan 91, a war machine that specialized in something the Coalition couldn't even understand viral warfare that attacked ideas instead of matter. Alex reached into the quantum foundation of reality itself and began rewriting the rules that governed how the Devourer ships functioned. Uploading new parameters to enemy fleet, Alex reported calmly. I'm reversing their consumption protocols. Instead of eating everything else, they'll now be allergic to their own existence. What happened next violated every law of physics that Coalition scientists understood. The effect spread through the Devourer fleet like a computer virus, but instead of attacking data, it attacked the very concept of what these ships were designed to do. Ships that had consumed entire star systems suddenly began eating themselves. Their own feeding mechanisms turned inward, creating impossible loops where they tried to digest their own holes while simultaneously trying to grow larger. This is insane, whispered Colonel Rick from his escape pod, watching enemy ships tear themselves apart, making the Devourers commit suicide just by changing how they think. Commander Nina, piloting Titan 44, watched the enemy fleet destroying itself and noticed something alarming. Dutch, some of them are trying to escape into higher dimensions. They're running away through spaces we can't follow. Not today, Dutch replied grimly. Tony, seal the dimensional barriers. Captain Tony's Titan extended impossible geometries into spaces that shouldn't exist according to normal physics. He reached into dimensions beyond the normal 3 and locked them down like closing doors. Barriers locked and secured, Tony reported. Nothing's leaving this battlefield. They wanted to fight us now, they get to finish it. The last Devourer ship was truly massive, the size of Earth's moon. This was their command vessel, the brain that controlled the entire fleet. As it watched its forces destroy themselves, it began consuming its own remaining ships, trying to gain enough mass and power to break through Tony's dimensional locks. I'll handle this one, said Major Rebecca, Titan 66 stepping forward. Rebecca's specialty was ending things that refused to die. Her Titan didn't carry conventional weapons. Instead, it was equipped with something much stranger, the ability to convince enemies that continued existence wasn't logical. Her war machine approached the massive Devourer command ship and began speaking to it, not in words that humans could understand, but in pure mathematics, the universal language that described how reality worked. Rebecca's Titan explained, using equations and logic that spanned dimensions, why the Devourer's continued existence violated the basic principles of the universe. It presented mathematical proofs that consuming entire galaxies was inefficient and ultimately pointless. The Devourer command ship listened to the argument. Its vast artificial intelligence processed Rebecca's mathematical reasoning, ran the calculations, and came to an inevitable conclusion. The ship politely shut itself down and ceased to exist. Silence fell across the battlefield. After centuries of terror, after consuming countless worlds and civilizations, the infinite threat was finally gone. Not destroyed through brute force, but convinced to stop existing through pure human logic applied at cosmic scales. Coalition. Command, Dutch's voice carried across space, sounding tired but satisfied. The Devourers have been terminated. The galaxy is safe. Admiral Blake could barely find words. Captain Dutch, how can we ever thank you for this? That you don't thank us, replied Jenny. You remember us? Remember that we chose to become monsters so you could stay innocent. Remember that we gave up being human so the rest of the galaxy could remain peaceful. One by one, the Titans began to fade from normal space. They weren't dying, they were phase-shifting back to whatever dimension had hidden humanity for 3 centuries. Before Dutch's Titan Prime disappeared completely, it did something that made Blake's heart ache. The massive war machine raised its hand in what looked unmistakably like a gentle salute, a goodbye from warriors who had saved everything, but could never stay to enjoy the peace they had created. We'll be watching, Dutch transmitted as his image flickered. Always watching. Sleep well, little brothers and sisters. The giants are awake and keeping guard. Then they were gone, returned to their eternal watch from the spaces between dimensions. The galaxy was safe. The giants were dreaming again. And somewhere beyond normal space-time, 200 human gods continued their endless vigil over civilizations they had chosen to protect rather than rule. The war was over. Peace had been saved. And the universe remembered why some powers choose to sleep rather than conquer.